The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on women in finance. We hope that you can all see our screen. We have some tips before we get started to make sure that your audio is working, that you can both hear us, and potentially also raise your hand later on to be speaking with us and engaging with us in this conversation with experts on women in finance. If you have any technical problems, please send us an email to knowledge.gateway@unwomen.org, and we will try to support you. Before we start with the conversations, we have a few questions for you. We have actually two polls. We have one at the beginning and one towards the end. And the first one is, where are you in the world? And you have different options: Africa, excluding North Africa, Americas and the Caribbean, which includes the US and Canada, Arab states, which then includes North Africa, South Asia and the Pacific, Europe and Central Asia. So we will start the poll, and while we are also awaiting other participants. Please enter your questions into the poll that we have just launched. Okay, thanks so much for inputting where you're from. We will close this poll in a few seconds. We have 18% from Africa. Welcome, everyone. 41 from Americas and the Caribbean, Asia Pacific 14%, and 29% Europe and Central Asia. So welcome, everyone. We hope to also have somebody from Arab states at the course of the webinar. Before we continue, my name is Anna Felt. I'm the manager of the Knowledge Gateway for Women's Economic Empowerment. I welcome all of you to this webinar. It is a webinar that has pulled together a few different experts from some activities that we've had around the topic on women in finance over the last couple of weeks. As you may have already been engaged in our e-discussion, and my colleague Eduardo will be giving some highlights from the recommendations and some highlights from the e-discussion. We also, as the Knowledge Gateway team and UN Women, participated in the PowerShift Forum. So we have a few speakers from the PowerShift Forum that will give some highlights on what happened there in the area of women and finance. And we also have an expert from the She Summit who will also give some highlights on what happened at the She Summit a few weeks ago. But before we start with introducing the experts, we want to make sure that, we really would like to hear from you. And there are different ways to get your feedback and questions in this conversation. One is to use the chat box and to type it into the chat box. And we will be looking out for your comments and try our best to allocate them to the expert or respond ourselves, depending on the topic. There's also another way that you can engage by actually talking with us, and that's by raising the hand sign. And as we come to the Q&A session towards the end, after the speakers have concluded their presentations, we will allow you to have conversations with the experts and ask them specific questions. And you will be kept unmuted with your microphone, so we don't have background noise interference until we give you the word, and then we'll unmute your microphone And we encourage all of you to use a headset so there's not a lot of background noise when it's your turn to speak. So coming to the agenda, we will start with a little bit of a highlight from the e-discussion that we had last month on women and finance. And then we will move into our experts that participated in the PowerShift Forum to give an overview and some highlights there. We'll have one expert speaking and introducing the topic of angel investors. Who are they and how do they support women entrepreneurs? And we also have some other of our experts that will come in and add to that conversation. We are still waiting for our speaker from Tanzania. He might be joining us during the course of the webinar from Equity Bank in Tanzania, who will be speaking about women's financial inclusion in Africa. And then we will get to an interesting conversation on how do we engage with companies in this area and how can we have productive partnerships around the corporate sector, academia, and nonprofits in this area. And then we'll have some highlights from the SHE Summit. And then there will be opportunities for all of you to come in and ask questions or raise your hands to speak with the experts. And then I will do some closing remarks and also give you some updates on what we are doing here on the Knowledge Gateway in terms of updates that will be coming over the next 3 months. So Eduardo, please give us some highlights on the e-discussion on finance.
Okay. Hello, everyone. The e-discussion Make Financial Markets Work for Women was co-organized by UN Women and the University of Oxford Business School from 14th of May to 6th of June and run on empowerwomen.org. The objectives of the discussions were to bring attention to issues around women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment, leading to the 2014 PowerShift Forum hosted in Oxford. Some of the highlights: the discussion brought together nearly 6,000 women and men from 168 countries. They contributed in total 69 substantive comments discussing a series of issues related to women's access, participation, and leadership in finance. So participants emphasized that social norms still play a major role in women's access to capital and in their participation in the financial service sector. They highlight the fact that change in social norms require some gender-responsive commitments and actions from all relevant stakeholders. So we are talking about men and boys in the family to community members and leaders, from governments and to NGOs, from public to the private sector, from mainstream financial institutions to women's cooperatives, as well as academia and think tanks. So it's kind of everyone should be involved to change the status quo on the financial sector. The discussion focused on 4 key areas. One was women's access to financial services and products. The second one, financial literacy and skills. The third one, employment in the financial sector. And the fourth one, measuring gender impact in the sector. In terms of women access to financial services and products, participants agree that patriarchal structures have perpetuated discriminatory practice and informed discriminatory laws and policies in the sector. For example, a participant commented that in India, most women have access to basic financial services like saving accounts, insurance schemes, etc. But the basic problem is that women are not given freedom to manage their finances independently. Women can only spend a small part of her income on herself. So that's kind of a perspective from India, but that resonates with the reality in many other countries, in developing countries. Also, conditions in the finance sector are too harsh to cater to the average women, particularly in rural areas. So financial institutions usually demand collaterals before giving loans, and most women are not able to fulfill this condition, and thus lose out on a range of opportunities. Another concern is women's difficulty to move from microcredit to large loans. So it's kind of one of participants commented that female entrepreneurs, for instance, tend to seek financing with the same frequency as male entrepreneurs, but the average amount obtained is less than half. Women tend to ask for less and to be approved for less. And that's another issue that was brought during the online discussion. There were other important factors that people mentioned, like access to financial services if you are in the rural area, the less likelihood of women to utilize formal finance, also women reliance on assets that are more easily interchangeable, such as livestock, etc. So that is some of the key things that were brought during the online discussion on the topic of access and participation in the financial services. In terms of financial literacy and skills, many participants observed difference between women's and men's attitudes and confidence towards finance and financial decisions. The reasons are many, but what as a participant commented that illustrate that is that sometimes the culture serves as a sort of informal barrier. Women are required to depend a lot on their husbands' opinions, especially when it comes to financial issues, and thus they are not empowered to think and play for them independently without spouse approval. That was Jacqueline input from Kenya. Participants agree that financial education is also a key step towards women's inclusion into the financial system, and that women with financial knowledge and skills are more confident and in financial matters and more likely to participate in economic activities. So that's one thing that came out as a recommendation as well. Apart from that, we have like some inputs on women's employment in the financial sector, and that's a number of barriers to women employment and leadership positions in the financial sector were identified, and that includes underrepresentation of women in engineering, finance and business advanced education, which limits the pool of women entering the financial sector in the first place, stereotypes and unconscious bias in recruiting and promoting women in the financial sector, requirements to work long hours and to travel frequently for long periods of time, making it difficult to find work-life balance. So all these are kind of conditions that have hindering women to progress in the financial sector career. And the last point on measuring gender impact, participants all agree that measuring impact of finance on gender equality has a lot of benefits. So evidence shows that monitoring and reporting on gender equality results increased awareness and institute change. So sex disaggregated data offers an additional tool to transform culture and practice of financial institutions alongside policy advocacy and programs. So, and that we are talking about basic measures of number of women in leadership positions, number of women with bank accounts, number of women with access to credit, etc. And they are all useful measures to the extent that they are used to inform corrective actions. But of course, there are a lot of issues around measuring and how you measure and what are the metrics that you use, etc., and how to get the data, etc., that were brought to attention during the online discussion. The key things are participants come out with some recommendations, and I will list like some of the recommendations that they come out with. And I would like and encourage speaker guests as they speak to reflect on these points and provide some insights on how to make these recommendations are valid. So the recommendations were ensure legal and regulatory framework on property and land rights for women. That's a big issue, and that's a recommendation that makes total sense in the current scenario. Move beyond microcredits to offer regular financial service to unprivileged women. And then we are talking, again, in developing countries especially and rural areas. develop a diversified range of gender-responsive financial products that meets the needs of different groups of women. Identify and contest underlying social structures that inhibit women's employment in finance. Another recommendation is use mobile technologies to help increase women's access to finance and increase their financial education and training opportunities. Another one, encourage the relative few women in leadership positions to be role models for other women entering careers in finance. Promote the establishment of mutuals and cooperative financial institutions. And the last one, encourage partnership involving the private sector, governments, and the civil society. They're all really relevant recommendations, and they would all make a huge difference to the financial sector and the inclusion of women in finance. And now I'd like to listen to some of the speakers talk about what they are doing to make that a reality and what they propose others to do to make that happen. So I will pass the floor to the next speaker to talk about the PowerShift Forum. Okay.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. So we will move quickly over to the experts that we have invited for today's webinar. And we will invite Valerie to give a little bit of an overview on what happened at the PowerShift, what were the excitements there, and we will have Jean Sullivan to come in after her presentation. Valerie? Yep.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. PowerShift was really put together by Professor Linda Scott at the University of Oxford several years ago, and the focus in 2013 was really around entrepreneurial women and how women across the spectrum, no matter where you are in the world, how you have the tools you need, the mentorship, etc., in order to be successful being an entrepreneur. This year, the focus was really on expansion of that. When we look at what is necessary for women entrepreneurs, no matter where you are, in some way, shape, or form, finance or access to money, capital comes into play. It doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of women. So this year's focus was really all about the financial system, and when you look at the history of women and money, for more than 2,000 years, many women have been excluded from the entire system of money. So often women are engaged in unpaid labor, barred from some of the things Eduardo talked about, inheriting wealth. We understand that in so many parts of the world, women aren't even able to own land. Many areas forbidden have bank accounts. The women in history in the East and West have been really effectively left out of the world of investment and credit. So this whole conference was really about how do we create a more inclusive system to promote growth and equality, not only in finance but in women's own businesses. So it was a wonderful forum in the sense of bringing together, which was very important, corporations, academicians, NGOs, governments, because we're all in this together, and it's really important that we work through what are not only the problems, but let's not always focus on the problems, but let's focus on what can the solutions be. And so one of the things that what I thought was quite compelling is we really spoke about innovators to consumers, how women are changing technology, mobile, and finance. And Eduardo mentioned mobile technology and the importance of that. most people, especially women around the world, one of the first things that they have access to is actually to a phone, to a mobile phone. So we spoke with Sevi Samari from Cherie Blair Foundation, and this whole panel was really run by Jean Sullivan, a very dear friend and one of the partners at StarVest that actually invest capital in women technology companies. And the discussion was really quite good, because it was saying why aren't we using today's technology such as mobile to really talk about finance, to educate women on finance, but also to create mentoring programs using the mobile phone so that you're not out there on your own, but you actually have access to someone to help you. So it's really, it was a lively discussion. We even created what we call value propositions or possible products, again, looking for solutions. And that's what PowerShift is all about. It's not only discussion, but it's action. It's what are the things we're going to take back to the rest of the world, to our own worlds, our own networks, and to create something that we could hopefully bring back in 2015 and say, yes, this is what we accomplished based on our discussion. So it's not a conference or forum around just chatting, but it's really taking action and moving it forward. We spoke a lot about, I thought this was quite interesting too. We spoke a lot about what about literacy and the ability for people to understand and use right terminology. Is that stopping us in some way to having access to the financial system? And one of the things that I thought was quite compelling is that participation in most societies is defined as occupation. And if you define as adding to income versus occupation, perhaps that creates a much higher participation rate of women from around the world. And that was really quite telling, and that was brought to us by one of the professors. And it's also there's stereotypes of how we perceive women to be, the fact that our children, we spoke also in other sessions about, are we really allowing access for women and girls to financial employment, to financial literacy? We tend to know in many countries, if you don't especially get to girls by age 8, 9, 10, and they get a sense that education, number one, is important, but number two, that the financial education, the importance of that, as well as understanding finances. And it's not about you making money, it's about you making money and you making choices about the money that you make and that you spend, that no one else is handling that for you. So the entire actually about 2 days that we were together, we also really spoke a lot about the importance of financial inclusion, because as one of the speakers, Walt McNee of MasterCard Worldwide said, talk is pretty cheap. Women compromise, and we are half of the sky. Actually, we're 51 to 52% now, more than half. And so we need to be sure that there are economic opportunities for women, and that we have to make sure that gender inequality has to go away. It's unacceptable, and we need it in order to really continue to grow in our countries, to grow in our cities, and to grow in our villages. Because without participation of women, we literally cannot continue to have any growth in any financial sector. And as we know, no matter what you touch, whether it's your business or your personal life, finances in some way, shape, or form become a part of that. So PowerShift was really all about a terrific discussion on how we pay it back by helping other women, but also how do we, pay it forward? How do we personally become involved? How personally we can change the way, the lexicon, the way people talk about women in the financial world. And it was really a great couple of days of coming together, and the fact of the diversity of the audience I think was really important, and it wasn't all women. We did have men, and they participated extremely wonderfully, actually, and thoughtfully. And the whole point is we're in this together and we're partners. So that's just a quick overview of what PowerShift is all about. And one of the things that we had brought forward at this PowerShift that really came out of a discussion last year in 2013 was, how do we make sure that we are including women in finance in the Sustainable Development Goals that are going forward at the UN. And we have a petition that we've put together that we're going to take to Queen Maxima, who actually has been appointed by the Secretary General to really focus on women and women in finance. So we hope that she takes that forward, because financial inclusion for women has basically dropped off of the agenda, and it's unacceptable. So we have a petition that we're hoping each of you will sign, and our organizers, Anna, Eduardo, and Grace, will make sure that it comes up on your screen so that you could cut and paste it, and I hope using your mobile phones, your laptops, your iPads, your whatever you have, that you'll be sure to sign the petition, because it's really all about us, and it's about helping each other. So thank you. And now Jean Sullivan, who was a very active part, as well as Suzanne on our agenda, and David, were at PowerShift. So I'll turn it over to Jean to add some color commentary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. We'll now hand over the microphone to Jean. Jean, you have been unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Valerie. That was a terrific overview. This is Jean Sullivan. I am delighted to be part of this discussion this afternoon. And I was very involved and thrilled to be involved in this PowerShift conference that you just heard about from Valerie. I was thrilled to be able to curate the first afternoon, which was billed as the pre-conference. And you heard the quick overview of insight that we got, not only what Anna is doing with the Knowledge Gateway, which we hope you're going to participate in, but the Cherie Blair organization and a group called Include. What I learned that I didn't know is all the wonderful kinds of investing and micro-lending that is going on globally. It is pretty exciting. We are making change. One of the pieces that Anna wanted us to do was do a brief intro about ourselves, and I'll just give you a couple sentences in the fact that I've been a tech investor for more than 25 years and a co-founder of a fund called StarVest Partners in New York City. And I am now an advisor to StarVest and an advisor to entrepreneurs. And I am passionate about fueling and funding the entrepreneur, especially women, and I like to say, and a few good men. And how did I become so passionate? It's because I started speaking at these conferences for women, about women, what's going on with women. And I became a student of the research. And I am just so surprised to have learned that you know this, only about 17% of the Fortune 1000 are women. Do you realize we are the ones who are making 80% of the purchasing decisions? And in the U.S. alone, that's $7 trillion worth of business, moving towards about 28 trillion globally in the next few years. Why aren't we at the table, the board table? Why aren't we running companies and getting funded? Why aren't more of us investors and angel investors? And I and my colleagues, certainly those of us on the phone, those of us who have been a part of these conferences, we and you, the reason you're on this discussion today is you care, and we can do something about it, and we are making change. So a couple of things I want to share is that at PowerShift, beside really a great insight and fun for me to be part of this, two things stood out. One, this petition you just heard about from Valerie, this is how we wake people up. So I'm hoping not only that you sign this, because we need a lot of signatures to really get attention, but send it on if you're part of an ecosystem. But the second thing that I thought was so much fun is they stage a debate in the tradition of like the Oxford Union debate. And they were able to debate the subject of the House believes the city is no place for a lady. Now, if you had to learn what I learned a few years ago, the city is London's term for Wall Street. So the fun kind of tongue-in-cheek part was, hey, should a lady even be there? And so they had a rousing debate that was really quite whimsical and interesting and funny. And a fabulous woman brought down the House as they went back and forth. Her name was Ann Richards. She's the Global Chief Investment Officer at the Aberdeen Asset Management. And she had some concluding statements that just showed, look, I've been in the city many years in this kind of role. Here's a high-level executive role, decision-making role. She's on a board of a FTSE company. She was so articulate and fabulous. And so everyone, it just really, her comments just brought down the house because she was so articulate and interesting and compelling. And it really made you feel proud that, you know, this woman has the senior position and there needs to be a lot more of us, and just made a compelling case that yes, we need to be there, we can make a difference, we do bring a different lens to the table. So that was thrilling, and then they had a vote, and of course it overwhelmingly was shot down. And yes, we do belong on Wall Street, we do belong in the financial world, we need to be at the table, we need to be in part of the city and these financial organizations, and you know, let's continue this. So those are just a few thoughts of what occurred in this really very vibrant discussion which happened May 26th to 29th at Oxford, really led by this really terrific Professor Linda Scott, who was the founder of this whole concept. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Jean, for those reflections. It's great that in the debate that it was concluded that we do belong in the financial sector, and that we had very good debaters on that side of the table. So thank you so much for that. I will now hand over to Susan, who would be speaking about a topic on angel investors.
Okay, great. This is Suzanne Beagle. I'm speaking to you from London, where I lead a group called Clearly Social Angels, which is an angel network which is about 50% women, and was involved for a long time in an angel investment network in the U.S. called Investors Circle. And this is part of a group of networks around the world where people are coming together to invest their own private capital into early stage and exciting growing companies that have social or environmental impact at their core. And so my work has been very much around having been an entrepreneur and having been an investor for a long time, now really helping to organize other investors around not only the UK and the US, but around the world at this point. And many of them are women, and many of them are people who want to invest with a gender lens. So I want to take a minute to just sort of unpack a few of those things. First of all, what is an angel investor? It's someone who comes in at a company either when they're at seed stage or they're kind of incubating an idea, a new business model, a new kind of product or service, or they come in at what you would call validation stage or early stage, where they're just starting to scale up and they're just really refining their business model, making sure the company really knows how to speak to its customers, how to sell, how to market, how to run their business. And that's a really critical time for an entrepreneur to get support from people who not only provide investment capital, but also contacts and connections and even some emotional support. Linkages to potential customers, linkages to potential employees and advisors, but again, absolutely putting in financial capital to help it grow. So my piece of that world is, first of all, that I look at things that are around social and environmental impact. So that could be across any sector, any category, but where the business in its core is really aiming to solve a social or environmental problem in addition to being something commercial. And when I talk about a gender lens, I'm not only speaking about women as entrepreneurs, but I'm also speaking about companies whose products and services positively affect the lives of women and girls. And you can imagine the sort of range of products and services from financial to consumer products to sanitation and water and light to really anything in the health arena. And then finally, even a business that is started or run by a man or a group of men, but where really the opportunity for economic opportunity for the women that work there, whether they're in the supply chain or they're in the employee base, for women to really have ownership and to have good jobs and economic opportunity, that it doesn't have to only be women entrepreneurs. So that's my frame. But we had great conversations at PowerShift talking with people like Jackie Vanderbroek, Joy Anderson, Catherine Collins, Lori Spengler, some of the other people that we've talked about, Jean of course, about how do we really bring this lens of placing individual capital to support businesses to this bigger question of women's economic empowerment. And the place where we really come together is to say, look, if we are the ones who can use our private capital, if angel investors anywhere in the world can use their private capital in these early stages, we can build businesses, we can create wealth, we can influence how these businesses are run in terms of their labor policies and their supply chain work, safety, security, sustainability, use of energy, and we can be board members. We can influence financial institutions in terms of lending and providing the right kind of tools for our portfolio companies. And we can run funds and venture funds which then aggregate these kind of individual businesses and play a role not only as investors in those funds but also as leaders of those funds, fund managers, investment committee members. So there are a lot of different places that we can play. And we talked a little bit about how the venture capital world, the angel world, is about 40 years old or so. It wasn't something that existed for thousands of years, but people have been lending and supporting each other's businesses for thousands of years. And so how do we want to take a feminine view and say, do the structures that have been developed really support women-owned businesses and growing women's businesses? Do the terms on a term sheet, do the ways that people get paid back, do the expectations of how these businesses will grow really match up with what women-led businesses are capable of? And in some cases, there's absolutely no distinction, but that there may be some times where there's really value in saying that there are distinctions. The other thing that we brought up is that smarter investing is what we're out there to be smarter investors, and we're also out there to make a positive social and environmental difference, but that we're not really out there just to do investing in women because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. And I know Jean mentioned this. Where does that come out? Well, it comes out by saying that if you can look at a gender lens and identify risks that you might not have seen or opportunities that you might not have seen if you weren't paying attention to a gender lens, then that can make you a smarter investor. And investors are always looking for where's the competitive advantage, or where can I de-risk my investment, or where is the opportunity that somebody else isn't going to see. And women are in a remarkable place to be able to see those opportunities. We also talked about the fact that we need to have the right intermediation. We need to have people who can help find those companies, source those companies, really help people see if they're ready for angel capital, structure those kind of deals. And there are incredible women like Lori Spengler and Include Solutions, which is part of Triodos, that are out there doing that every day, and bringing investors together with entrepreneurs and these fund vehicles, and that angels can play a role in being part of a fund, not just being part of investing in directly in a company. And that from a global perspective, that there are women in the U.S. and Western Europe who are hungry to support women and businesses that positively affect the lives of women in emerging markets. And so we need better ways of connecting the dots, and it's already starting to happen with some of these angel networks, but we know that there's more that's needed. There's a beautiful project that Calvert Foundation has called Women Investing in Women, and they've just launched a new site just a few days ago called vested.org for people in the U.S. that want to support projects around the world with loan capital for as little as $20, so it doesn't even need to be something where someone's kind of a big investor. But also to really be able to look at things like chamas in Kenya, where women have been collectively saving and supporting each other's businesses for a long time, and say as the angel world comes to Africa and Southeast Asia and Latin America, how can we really respect and value the patterns and the ways that people are supporting each other's businesses now, and bring what we know in the West to make something that's a vibrant combination where we can all together on a global basis have women supporting women and investing in women to make a better world. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. This was very informative, Susan, to bring us a little bit of light on the concept of angel investors. And I have some suggestions, but I would pick them up towards the end. But we are still waiting for David, and we don't know if he has technical problems. David was supposed to speak about some of the activities of the Equity Bank in Tanzania. And as many of you may be aware, the Equity Bank has made big strides in giving financial inclusion for women in Eastern Africa, and I think they're expanding throughout Africa at this point. We hope if he's not able to join today that we'll have another opportunity to hear more about what the Equity Bank is doing in Tanzania, in Kenya, and other countries in Africa. If he comes towards the end and might have sorted out his technical issues, we will invite him back into the conversation. But before we move on to the next topic, on how to engage with companies for women's economic empowerment, I would like to just let you know that we have put a link in the chat box that takes you to the petition that Valerie was talking about in reference to the power shift and the petition about including women and finance in the Sustainable Development Goals agenda and the post-2015 development agenda. So the link for you who are interested in participating in that is in the chat box. But I will invite Valerie back. And Valerie, if you can also mention a little bit about who you are and what your company is doing, and then go into the discussion on engaging with larger companies in nonprofit world with academia, etc. Valerie, you have the
yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anna. I'm Valerie Gelb, and I'm the CEO of the Barnyard Group, which is a leading advisory consulting group. You know, we're really passionate about storytelling. We have a sharp focus on emerging social and digital media. But the most important thing for me as a founder and the CEO is, how do you build online communities? How do you formulate, implement great marketing strategies, and establish compelling and natural connections to real-world issues? And one of the things that drives what I do is, I was actually the Chief Sales Development Officer at MasterCard Worldwide for 14 years, and I was one of the top 18 executives who served on the management committee, took the company public in 2006, and I ultimately was responsible for the global sales force in 210 countries and territories. So my expertise really lies in the areas of payments, strategic development, global customers, of course, products and solutions. But when I retired from MasterCard Worldwide in 2010, I had the wonderful opportunity to be the CEO of the Global Fund for Women for almost 2 years. It wasn't a role that I wanted to take on permanently, but I knew it was important to an organization that I love. If you're aware of the Global Fund for Women, it's the largest grant-making foundation in the world devoted to women's issues. And what I love is that it's all about communities on the ground, women on the ground, making a difference. So I have the multinational, if you will, experience as well as the nonprofit experience. And then I formed with 2 of my partners the Barnyard Group, the company that I have right now. But I also have stayed close to Global Fund for Women. I continue to be very actively involved with them, Women's Refugee Commission and International Refugee Commission. In addition, I serve on the corporate boards of Symbol Inc., a mobile technology payments company, and on Empowered, which is a solar-powered lighting and equipment company. And I also serve as an advisor to the University of Connecticut for PhD and MBA students, and I mentor women around the world, entrepreneurial women in their businesses, and I'm president of the International Women's Forum of Connecticut. So I have just a few things on my plate, but as you could probably tell, they mostly relate to women and how we can empower women and how we can actively work with women in building communities that are important. One of the things I thought I would speak about today is really the importance of working together, and it's a long-term partnership that I tried to create through my company, the Barnyard Group, is how do I take all of the various skills that I've had, how do I bring all those pieces together, and to me they come together in the Barnyard Group in the sense of creating long-term partnerships with NGOs, nonprofits, corporations, and academicians. And most people say, wow, none of those could possibly coexist with each other. But they actually all do. And so what we do, if you think about a triangle, you know, at one tip you have the academicians who are collecting data and information. The other tip, you're, of course, getting access to NGOs and what are their needs, and then you're looking at what are the needs of multinationals and how do you bring them all together to really create solutions around what are some social impact solutions that we can really make together. And the challenges are, number one, bringing all the parties to the table, right? Because you can't overload the table or you really don't end up getting anywhere. But there are great examples of, let's say, with CARE, working with Insurance Company Alliance and really bringing together new insurance products that help women but at the same time help Alliance. But most importantly, they really create a foundation of security and risk management, if you will, for women in their financial world. So it's how do you bring these pieces together and how do you include all the parties? So I work a lot with NGOs, if you will, and multinationals. But the NGOs, when you think about it, they're representing women on the ground. So it's really important when we work on these projects that we're also bringing the actual women that are going to be impacted by the product or service to the table. So it's really important for me that we're all about action and not about words, and how do we implement, execute. And there's some great examples of very large retailer from around the world that is working very closely creating a way for women in rural countries to and rural villages to be able to bring their products to market, to major markets that they would never have access to. All these types of things happen when you're able to bring this consortium of people together to really work together on what's important at the end of the day for the women on the ground. So there's a lot of motivations for doing it, but one of the biggest ones is, as a society, it's very difficult to rely on governments anymore to manage all these pieces, and it's important for multinationals and companies to step up to the plate. They have, in many cases, by law regulation, they have what they call CSR, or corporate social responsibility goals. But what we're building together is not, it goes beyond that. It's really how is it helpful for them as a multinational, but how is it helpful to the NGO? How is it helpful to the women on the ground? And how is it helpful ultimately also to the academicians? And where the academicians come in, if most of you are very familiar with corporations, everything is about data, information, making sure that everything adds up, that there's hard facts behind what you're doing. And so the academicians really help through the research. And this is how I met Professor Linda Scott, actually, because she does a lot of work around the research and bringing these multinationals and NGOs together also. And so it's really about knowing, understanding if in fact you are making an impact. Because at the end of the day, what you want is you want to help in areas of bringing either new skills or helping the labor force for women in some way, but it's also about how do you change the lexicon on how people are thinking about and talking about women, and women as occupation versus profession and things like that. So it's really, how do we bring microcredit? There's all kinds of things, products, things that you want to bring to the table, but none of it matters unless it really and truly is helping the women on the ground in the most important ways.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for those reflections. We have already received a lot of comments from the audience, but we have one more speaker. I just wanted to mention that we are recording the session for anyone who wants to listen later on can do so, and we will share with everyone the recording and the slides that you have an opportunity to revisit some of these points later. Our final speaker, unless David joins us, is Margaret White, who was leading the organization of the She Summit a few weeks ago. And there were many interesting elements on women's economic empowerment, which also included women in finance. But I'll leave it to you, Margaret, to give some highlights from the She Summit and a little bit more about what that was about and the organization of the She Summit and what it stands for.
Sure. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to represent She Global Media and our founder, Claudia Chan, in this conversation. I think that consistent discussions and programs like this are really critical in the ongoing effort to support women's financial empowerment globally, so I thank you for that. I'm currently Senior Director of Global Partnerships and Programming for She Global, and our mission is to celebrate, cultivate, and convene women to empower them to lead their optimal lives. We do this via our online platform, which is claudiachan.com, which features our Remarkable Women interview series that profiles and promotes women leaders and influencers from various fields and backgrounds to share their personal and professional insights, wisdom, their stories, and advice. Jean Sullivan happens to be one of those remarkable women. We also critically produce our annual She Summit, which is the global leadership and lifestyle event for women. She stands for She Helps Empower. And we just held our third event on June 5th and 6th. We did it in partnership with the 92nd Street Y here in New York City. We had 2,000 attendees over 2 days and a global live stream audience of over 70,000 viewers. And the hashtag She Summit has now reached approximately 197.8 million impressions via social media. So we definitely had people talking, and possibly I think that number could be a little higher, given that we haven't looked at the metric in a week. So overall, our content is focused on empowering women in every aspect of their lives, from personal to professional, and how the state of women domestically and globally impacts those aspects, with the premise that women's lives are very integrated and that each element impacts the other. Primarily, our goal is to provide insights, inspiration, and practical takeaways so women are left motivated and can really come away with next steps on their goals and their aspirations. This year we had over 25 panels and talks with over 80 speakers. So we really kind of blew it out of the water this year. It was very, very robust programming, and we had speakers including Ambassador Samantha Power, journalist Soledad O'Brien, also journalist and author Marianne Pearl, the editor from the Shriver Report, and a lot of other really incredible corporate and nonprofit organizations represented. And we also included men this year in the conversation, which was a really, really exciting element, and they did a fantastic job. I think that it really kind of created a shift in perspective for all of us. There is hope. There are some really fantastic men out there who really get empowering women and what that means. And actually, in FYI, all of this content is available on livestream.com, because we recorded it this year. So if you go to livestream.com and you search for She Summit, you should be able to find it and enjoy it yourselves. And obviously a topic that universally affects women's lifestyles as well as their ability to lead and have social impact is financial empowerment. And it's a topic that we always build into our programming. Again, having these conversations in these various formats such as conferences, webinars, workshops, and whatnot, I think are really, really critical. And so in supporting that concept, we featured several panels this year that highlighted amongst, we have such a diversity of topic areas, literally from fertility to, discussions of women's confidence to investing in girls and engaging them in STEM. But we always incorporate multiple panel topics around personal finance, We had an entrepreneurship panel about women business owners going from start to scale, and one in particular that was personal finance oriented on managing money and making meaning. So really, really robust programming that I think we had some excellent takeaways from. And this year the timing was really, really fortuitous as we happened to take place the week after PowerShift Forum. We were really, really thrilled to be introduced to Thematic Campbell and Linda Scott's work. So we were able to pick up the conversation from them and announce a call to action in regards to helping support the petition that's about putting women's financial inclusion back into the UN's post-2015 development goals. So really, just as Valerie detailed in her presentation, we actually read Linda Scott's letter to our audience, all perfectly and conveniently timed that I read the letter just prior to Anna's closing discussion on empowerwomen.org. And we directed our audience to sign the petition. I know that you provided the bit.ly link, and we directed everyone to go to doublexeconomy.com to sign that. And Danetta Campbell and her team really, really helped continue pushing that effort through our social media channels. So we are kind of continuing that drive. So I really hope we can support you getting to your threshold so that it can be presented to Queen Maxima. But inevitably, we believe very strongly in the universal economic empowerment of women. It's an underpinning of so much to achieve parity. And as media, event, educational companies in the women's space, we all really need to see ourselves as activists and continue to drive and perpetuate these conversations, via our online platforms, our event platforms, and we are very responsible for making this change happen to empower women globally. And you can really expect She Global and She Summit to continue to do so. That's my overall highlight wrap up for you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And I think, again, we have shown that all coming together and supporting each other pays off, that we had our e-discussion, we had the PowerShift Forum, and we had a link between the PowerShift Forum and the She Summit, and how much attention we have been able to bring around that. So thank you so much for making that bridge as well. We have not found David yet, so we'll move on to the question and answer session. We have a number of questions, and I will ask our experts. I will go through some of the ideas of the questions, and then I will give you an opportunity to respond from your perspective. So I will give each of you the floor again to be able to respond from your perspective, and which one you would like to address. But some of the question relates to internet access, to access these kind of platforms, financial platforms, and we actually received an email from one of our members in Iraq who informed us they could not participate today because of the internet has been shut down in Iraq. So yes, it is very important, and some of these, if you have any ideas on how we could work better on this and linking the financial inclusion with the digital literacy and digital access, internet access, broadband access, etc., if you have any ideas around that. There is also, I think it's very much linked to it, and how do we reach out to rural areas and rural women? How do we make the women in remote areas and rural areas also part of this movement in bringing women financial services? We also have a specific question around the PowerShift Forum, and did it focus specifically on women in general, or did it also have aspects within the forum that focus on the lower income level women in both developing and developed countries, I presume? The participant didn't specify in what country, but if you can have Valerie, Jean, Susan, in your perspective from the PowerShift Forum, what were the debates around the different income levels of women? And then I think we'll take those now, and then we will go through the comment box again and see if we missed anything. But I'll start to give Valerie the floor. Valerie?
Hi. Regarding the question on power shift, the focus was, that's why I use the terminology spectrum of women, because it really went from women in lower income levels all the way to women in higher income levels. I would say the majority of the discussion, however, probably played more into the space of lower income in the developing world. But another important piece that I think was brought out and was extremely important, there's also what we call the missing middle, right? There's various organizations, NGOs, nonprofits that definitely have their focus on, if you will, the lower end of the spectrum, and there's people that have their focus on the higher end of the spectrum. But who's really looking at kind of that missing middle, the women in, they're making a little bit of money but not really enough to get themselves out of poverty. They're starting businesses, they don't have some of the access, they don't have some of the NGOs or other organizations to kind of help them. So the general answer really is yes, we focused on all women, whether you were the lower end, the missing middle, or the higher end.
Thank you so much. I'll continue with Jean. Jean, any reflections on we have a lot of questions actually from participants from Pakistan that also talks about the broader complexity of access to finance, that it links, as I mentioned just before, to access to mobile phones, access to the internet, and out in rural areas in many countries, but many questions have been coming from Pakistan in how, you know, could we pull this together as a broader community?
You know, this is Jean. Thank you. I, too, am fascinated with what is going on in some of these emerging markets. There's true needs. I was very touched by the stories I heard. Certainly the Cherie Blair organization as well as the Include organization are doing things, but many others. And I'm suggesting to you, Anna, as part of your Knowledge Gateway platform, it'd be great to highlight some of those terrific organizations and then how these various areas can access them. There's so many needs. There are organizations, but we need better communication about how to find them, how to do business. And so I certainly am one of those, would love to learn more and know more and help communicate. But I think that you are in a great position if you could highlight them or make it more broad and knowledgeable how to do business. Certainly many speakers spoke on that at PowerShift, but you know, we need to disseminate that.
Thank you so much. Susan?
Unmuted.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one of the most exciting sessions at PowerShift for me was a project, and I know it doesn't directly relate to the question from Pakistan, but I think it indirectly does, which was between CARE and Barclays, which is working on better enabling the women's savings circles with access to other financial products and also some technology. And so saying, you know, what's been going on with those savings circles, even starting from such a micro amount of money, how can we say when they're ready to go up to the next level and they need a place to save that money, manage that money, deploy that money in a way that takes their capital and maybe marries it up with other capital, or takes their capital and makes it easier for them to circulate it. That there's starting to be banks and NGOs and other actors that are really wanting to see this happen, and not coming from a top-down kind of, we're a big bank, we're going to come in and try and sell you something, but rather what's already happening and how can we support it. There's a group that I've been approached by in Pakistan, which is trying to start a women's angel network. And it's thinking about the diaspora connection, so thinking about both men and women from Pakistan who are living in England or the US or somewhere outside of Pakistan, coming together with people who are entrepreneurs in Pakistan who are building businesses and saying, how do we support these women-owned businesses? And as an example, I think one of our ways to really potentially help is make these connections between the work that we're doing and the groups that are in country, so that people can both learn from best practices but also access some other talent and resources that can maybe make it happen faster or better, but being really locally appropriate.
Thank you so much. Margaret, do you have any additional thoughts on this? Or shall I move on to more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that you know, for organizations like ours, which, you know, produce online content and these, you know, very significant events, we certainly do our best to create programming that speaks to as many people as possible, and that you know, we try to create very substantive topics that, you know, while our, you know, still primarily addressing the audience here in New York, that's something that, you know, going from start to scale topics with your business and personal finance and budgeting are somewhat universal, and we like to incorporate nuggets and ideas that create big visions for women who, you know, might not be there yet on a financial spectrum or haven't yet even, you know, considered becoming business owners or considered their own personal finances. We try to create something that universalizes these topics and that women can derive practical tips and inspiration from. So basically speaking, I think that's where we try best to contribute and to speak to a global audience.
Thank you so much. Some interesting questions that have also come up, taking a little bit different angle. We have one question, how about not going for the global casinos like Wall Street and not supports banks to create money and more debt? What about other currencies, other rating systems? And how can we combine this with fair trade, I presume, and green economies? So that's one aspect that is being brought up to the conversation. Another aspect, we have one of our participants congratulating the efforts of the speakers and all the people who worked hard to promote women's access to finance. However, I think it's absolutely essential that we all continue to find ways to influence the way that established financial institutions interact with women. For example, how do we innovate thinking around collaterals that women can offer against the loans? So here's another aspect, and I invite you to give some reflections on these ideas. And I think then we will be wrapping up. One of the participants, Susan, is also asking for the specific link that you refer to a site. Maybe when I give you the floor, you could either put it in the comment box or read it out to the audience. But I'll start again with Valerie. Any thoughts on these two points that were brought up?
Yeah. I think what's really important, I love the question because that's really the work that I believe many of us are trying to do, is how do you break the paradigm? How do you shift the paradigm in some way to move away from, is it collateral that, you know, is it the question of the collateral? Is it a question of how you interact and relate to various ways that make sense within a culture or a particular society? So that's why I think the importance is bringing everyone to the table that you can to come up with those solutions, because what I'm finding when we're bringing together these various parties that never really spoke to each other, we're finding such creative solutions. So it's about talking, but it's also about having the mechanisms to bring those people together and to shift the conversation. So will it be done overnight? Probably not, but I think the more we create our communities and networks to be reaching out to each other, we could actually be offering great solutions. And I, implore each of you on the call, if you have the opportunity to send us, what are some of the issues, but more importantly, what are some of the solutions you see that actually might work best in your own community, in your own society. Those are the things I take back to the big banks, to the lenders. In a lot of countries, as we know, especially in the developing countries, the lending isn't coming from big banks. It's coming from insurance companies. It's coming from community sources. So you have to be able to create access to those players, but it's really about sitting down, talking about it, but coming up with what we feel the solutions are as women versus saying, we have a problem, now you go solve it. I think we need to solve it.
Thank you so much. We are pasting in here in the responses to the information that we got from Susan and Valerie in the chat box. We have posted it also now to everyone to see the different links to Accelerate Women now.org, okunte.org, Invest to Innovate. So you have that information in the question and answer box.
And Anna, can Suzanne mention something about quasi-equity?
Sure. I'll give Susan the word right now.
Thank you.
Susan?
Hi. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this in my talk. One of the great conversations at PowerShift, and that this project called the Women Effect and Revalue Gender is working on is, are there different mechanisms, like instead of straight debt or straight equity, which are things that have evolved over the years, to do things like tying payback to dividends, tying payback to revenue streams. There's a new tool called a demand dividend, which is when you make a loan to somebody, that you look at their cash flow every quarter and see what kind of position they are to pay back the loan, and make a good decision between the borrower and the lender to say, is this a good time to be paying back your interest and your principal this month, or should we push it back? And it's not something that traditional banks are innovating. It's something that is coming from outside. It's coming from philanthropists and impact investors, angel investors, other players who are saying, maybe we need some new tools. So I think in response to the question of, can there be a new set of tools for us to use to move money into businesses that have the potential to positively affect the lives of women and girls? This is a really rich time for us all to be working together, as I think we are on this call, to bring everything that people have from their different perspectives and say, what can we do that's different, that really respects the collateral that women have, the resources that women have, the opportunities and the constraints around assets that will make sense in each local context, in each sectoral context, in each context of area of impact that we're trying to have.
Thank you so much, Susan. We will, Jean, do you have anything to say? We are trying to wrap up. I think I have covered all of the questions that we have received. If I have missed any questions from any of the participants, feel free also to engage in our knowledge circles in continuing the conversations on this topic. Jean?
This is Jean again. The only thing I would like to add in summary, and I'll be brief here, I know we do have a lot of U.S. Participants also, and I just wanted to say that there are this great number now, a growing number of wonderful angel groups that do have a focus on women-led companies, and also there's so many crowdfunding opportunities now. My friend Deborah Jackson has formed the Thematic platform, which focuses on women-led companies for crowdfunding. One of the few that's gender-led crowdfunding. But there are many, many terrific companies that are getting some early funding from these platforms. And one thing I'm particularly fond of, there are many, and there's a variety of quality, but incubators and accelerators and shared workspaces that can really help you get started on your business. And I'm a real fan of those because I've seen companies enter as a project and exit as a real business, and that's pretty exciting. I'm also very aware, and thank you, Suzanne, for this, something called ANDI, the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs. There's the Criterion Institute, and I really had fun getting to know that team when I was at PowerShift. And then Linda Scott writes a very active blog called Double X Economy. Others, I'm very involved in Golden Seeds, which is a wonderful group of angels in the U.S., very active in New York and on the West Coast. There's the ASTIA network. We have formed an angel network as well as putting together a fund to fuel high growth women entrepreneurs. Springboard is wonderful, and Springboard is a creative fashion group, very focused on companies with fashion kinds of platforms and companies, real need. I'm close to both 37 Angels and the Pipeline Fellowship, which are teaching women how to be angels as well as investing in dynamic companies. Different, some are just social impact companies, but one doing some wonderful work. So there's just a quick lineup of some of the terrific organizations that are happening. And I say to you, if you're uncertain who to go to or how to apply, just ask one of us. I welcome your email and for any email that you write to me. And I'm sure any of us on the phone don't mind at all giving you input by email on where to point if that's what you need.
Thank you so much, Jean. Margaret, any more reflections?
Well, I have to say when it comes to economics and currency questions and specific investments, it's a little out of my purview. But it's very informative. I'm definitely taking a lot of brilliant ideas and resources away from these women for my to inform my additional programming and content curation.
Excellent. We actually have one courageous participant who would like to speak. So Michelle Buhuso will give you the floor by unmuting your microphone. Michelle? Hello, Michelle?
Hello?
Yes?
Hello?
Yes, hello, Michelle. We can hear you.
I hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I think that the lower cost of mobile banking transaction could help more women. Hello?
Yes, thank you. We can hear you. Can you introduce yourself? Where are you coming from?
I'm coming Ivory Coast.
Oh, welcome.
Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you so much for your participation. Yes, the mobile phone, is that what you wanted to bring up, the women's access to mobile phones?
Yes.
Yes.
I think that the lower cost, because in my country, the mobile banking is very developed, and this reduces the risk of theft and assault because they are operations that can be done even on very basic phone, but the rate of transaction remains low. Hello?
Yes, thank you so much for that contribution. It is a very important point that when we lower the cost of mobile phones, that it also supports women's access to finance. So thank you so much
Yes.
for that contribution.
Thank you for you also.
So we have reached the end, and I would like to thank everyone for your participation. We started off with listening to a summary provided by Eduardo on what the e-discussion on women in finance was all about. I encourage all of you to go into the knowledge circles and the discussion on women in finance to read the specific recommendations. And we have set up a second poll where we would like to hear on your recommendations what you think should be a priority. And we have 5 different options. Do you think that the most important priority should be given to ensuring property and land rights? That also links up to the question about the traditional forms of collaterals. Or is the priority should be given, you have one option to vote, to ensure that mainstream financial services are accessible to women, going beyond microcredit. C is to develop financial products specifically for women. Or do you think priority should be given towards mobile banking? Some of you have brought up that in the conversation. Or the final one is to work more on giving priority to encourage women to be role models in the financial sector. So we'll give you a little bit more time to respond, but it seems at this point that 1 and 2 are giving priority areas, but we'll wait to hear from all of you. We'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll close the poll. So we will now, we have 54% voting. Can you please all come in? 57%, please. We would like to hear what you think should be given priority in all of our agendas. 68%. A few more seconds. Okay, we received the 74% response rate. So thank you so much for all of you who responded. It seems to be a quite clear picture what all of you think. 32% of you think that we should focus on ensuring property and land rights for women, that's the fundamental priority. The number 2 was to ensure mainstream financial services for women. I know it's tricky to just choose one. They're all important elements, but it's interesting to see that the next one is to develop financial products specifically for women, and then on equal level came mobile banking and women role models at 14%. We will share these results with you afterwards if you are interested. But moving forward, in wrapping up this discussion, some of the points that I brought with me from this conversation is that talk is cheap and we need to take action. And I think that what the speakers today have done is to really emphasize some of the forum where people in this space have come together to really brainstorm and discuss how can we better collaborate. I think both the PowerShift Forum and the She Summit have had those opportunities for networking and for really coming together in platforms to drive this agenda forward. And that talk is cheap and action needs to be priority. We should not continue just debating about this, but really go and take action. And we have from the poll some concrete actions for all of us to be driving. But at the same time, exchange of these lessons learned and good practices is important. So we need to also have those opportunities to talk. We also had some points about how as individual women, how can we both pay back and pay forward to make sure that women who are less privileged can actually benefit from the actions that we take. We heard also from the experts that participated in the PowerShift about the petition. We provided you with a link in the chat box, and we encourage you to participate with the PowerShift team. We also learned a little bit more about what are angel investors and what are their role and how can they be influencing both individually but also in networks the business agenda and practices of businesses in terms of labor rights, women's rights, etc. And some of the ideas that I said, Susan, that I had was really how can we use the Knowledge Gateway to drive those networks of angel investors together. What I will talk about in a little bit is also some of our new ideas that I also presented at the PowerShift with bringing women in business into a business hub, creating a business hub on the Knowledge Gateway to have a concentrated space for the women entrepreneurs, larger companies and investors to have those discussions and exchanges. And finally, we will thank all of you for participating. We will just make a little bit highlight. My colleague Grace here will provide an overview for you who haven't yet been engaged on the Knowledge Gateway, empowerwomen.org. What are the different opportunities to be involved and to drive this agenda that we have been talking about today? Grace, I'll give you the floor.
So thank you. Thank you, Anna, for this great webinar and to all of the speakers that we had today. EmpowerWomen.org, as you may know, is the global platform for resources and discussions around women's economic empowerment. And on this platform, we invite you to several activities in which you can participate. Mainly in the lead up to the Beijing Plus 20 campaign, we will have a series of expert-led discussions, which will be followed by thematic webinar like the one that we're currently having, or by Google Hangouts. You can also input resources to our knowledge library, which house resources, publications, and also tools on women's economic empowerment. We do have a learning center, which is a subset of the knowledge library, as I mentioned, where you can also upload how-tos and tools that can help women entrepreneurs, academics, or graduate students who are doing research on women's economic empowerment. We also do, from time to time, remain really active on being social. So we do have activities on social media, such as Twitter chat, in which you are all welcome to be engaged. We do lead photo contests from time to time, which we also will plan on having in the context of the Beijing Plus 20 campaign, which is Empower Women, Picture It. So please be on the lookout for all our activities, which are also publicized on the landing page of the Knowledge Gateway. We do have some interesting components which will be added to the Knowledge Gateway platform, and I'm actually turning over the floor to Anna, who will go into those two new exciting components that we will soon be adding to the platform.
Thank you, Grace. And also to add to that, Margaret was talking about the She Summit. We have in our events page all the recordings of the She Summit for those who are interested from the live webcast. So if you click on events and then scroll down to the She Summit, you will have the different sessions there. What we are very excited about is our forthcoming components on the Gateway. One is the blog that we'll be launching in July. And for those, both of you experts that have participated today and our participants participating from all over the world, we invite you, if you have ideas about new things, some innovative approaches that are happening in your countries or taken up in your countries, there is an opportunity to contribute blog articles, and it will be launched towards the end of July, beginning of August, and we encourage all of you to contribute to that. The Business Hub, as I mentioned earlier, is a new component of the Gateway that we will implement specifically for this community in business, women entrepreneurs, people in finance, and here's the mock-up of some initial ideas that we have to bring in companies that are committed to gender equality and women's economic empowerment, to bring in women entrepreneurs, as well as the broader business community of investors, business schools, association, women entrepreneurship networks, to really have a more dedicated space for women in business and finance, etc. And what we will be offering to some of these companies is a dedicated feature page where they can be in charge of uploading information about their business and the activities that they have to promote women's economic empowerment. So these are some of the things that we are very excited about here in the Knowledge Gateway team to bring forward to you all in the next couple of months. We hope to be able to launch the Business Hub in September, and as I indicated, the blog will be coming July, August. So unless anybody else have something to add from the experts, I will now close the meeting, and I thank everyone, Susan, Valerie, Margaret, and Jean. Thank you so much for your excellent contributions and your insight to your expertise. And we hope that David will join us at our next webinar on this topic. Thank you so much.